And good morning, welcome to the Rugby Room, episode 3. Just after England Ireland played a storming game in the Six Nations.
Why are you smiling so big on
With,
that
with
one?
the right result occurring.
Blah, 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 blah.
Thank you for coming back and tuning in. And what I'm going to do now is just introduce our guests. So we've got some cracking guests on this show. And we're going to talk about MLR, Major League Rugby over here in the US. We're going to talk about endurance athletes, and we're also going to have a quick look at governance and World Cup management as we go through the hour. So I'm going to start to my left, and here's how we're going to do our intros today. Right, I'm just going to talk about you, and I got a bit of a quick fire rugby questions.
Oh, geez.
Right.
Here comes the trick questions. Yeah.
Just as a warm up, just as a simple warm up. So what you do is just going to introduce you, and then you get to choose a question or two from column A, one from column A, one from column B.
Oh, no.
See where we land. All right.
Those are up on the board here, right? Yeah.
There are no right or wrong answers.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
So to my left, got Evan Stratton. People, as you know about the show, veterans of rugby and veterans in rugby. Evan here is U.S. Marine Corps. Compelling story. He was at the age of 19 ambushed in Iraq, and sadly his best mate was killed in that ambush. And without digging too much into his experience, he came back to the US, was discharged, got into rugby, and most importantly, just recently has completed a 51-day row across the Atlantic.
50 days, 11 hours, and 35 minutes.
See it
There
in
you go.
his brain,
Yeah.
and probably his butt as well. And he's a world record holder. You broke a world record.
Yeah, we set the world record for the fastest American team to row an ocean and for our boat class,
And that boat class was what?
spin drift class.
Right. So for the uneducated and the non-nautical, what does that mean? 'Cause that
there's-
sounds like a fishing term.
There's just different boat builders, different boat classes. So we rolled in what's the way I put it is most people in the race were driving a Ferrari. We were driving Grandma's old station wagon. So we were in a pier class, old design type boat, but hey, we got across.
That's very marine of you, right?
I wish I had the Ferrari. I didn't figure out
Yeah,
till
do
we're
it-
on water.
do
We
it
were in
the
the
hard way.
Ferrari.
If there's a hard way to do things, call
yeah.
in the Marines.
Yeah.
It's
Is
bound
that
to
right,
happen.
Chet? So you basically rode the Atlantic in a bathtub.
In a bathtub, yeah, fancy bathtub. Yeah, had a few more
Fancy
comforts.
big bathtub.
Yeah, big bathtub with 3 other veterans. Yep.
So before we dig deep, rugby quiz, column A, column B.
All right. Column A, column B. I'll go with column B.
Column B. I'll give you an easy one. Who are the current world champions, men's 15s?
Oh, that's South Africa.
Right, see, I told you not to worry. All right,
I've still felt like I got it wrong.
Such confidence.
next one, column A or column B?
Column A.
Who's your favourite rugby player or character in the history of the sport ever? And why? You've got to ask, have a
Rugby
why.
character.
I'm worried what questions you're going to
Yeah.
ask me now. That's,
You know,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Get it
kinda-
wrong.
I'm gonna semi-defer this answer right now because I'm gonna go with the way that USA Rugby's developing right now, Major League Rugby. My favorite players or characters have always been international, but now that it's coming home and getting a little closer to home, I think that's to be determined. So,
Oh, really?
yeah.
So if I cut you in half, we're going to find the stars and stripes tattooed on your
blue, red, and
midriff.
blue, man. I'm sorry, I just have to.
All right.
I
Does
told,
that
you,
mean
I
you
told
don't?
you to say Ross Young to that.
Have you met Ross Young?
Does that mean you don't know any players in the MLR?
The MLR?
Ooh.
I don't. Well, yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's it. All right. One from column A, one or column B.
I'm gonna go column A again, even though it's tough.
All right. I've got to go easier now because you couldn't answer the last one. What's your favourite team in rugby, non-international? So it
Non-international.
can be any league.
Any league. I don't know.
You have-
Any level, any league.
Well, bearing in mind your last answer, I think we have to go as low as we can.
I mean, they're not off to a great start, but the Colorado Raptors, US Rugby Town, USA. It's where I'm from. It's where I'm born and bred. So I'm going to keep supporting the home team.
Cool. Awesome.
Man.
And last question for you then. Tullamore or Talisker?
Tullamore, it's Alisker. Now you're putting me between a rock and a hard place right now. I'm on the Tullamore podcast, and I wrote in the Talisker Whiskey Atlanta Challenge.
Ah.
So you're just a man of whiskey?
I'm just a man of whiskey. Yeah, I'm going to defer that
There's,
answer
there's
as
a good
well.
there's a good way of
You
going.
said they're going to be easy.
Come on. You like a challenge?
Yeah, well, I guess so.
So to your left, you've got Ross Young, current CEO of USA Rugby. And again, thank you very much for being here. But interestingly, your profile, you've were part of the Harlequins at the start of the English Premiership when you saw English rugby go from amateur to professional. Yep. So you've been right at the front end. Then you managed 3 or 4 World Cups.
3 for World Rugby, then helped set up 2015 for the RFU.
Cool. And now I like to say that CEOs of USA Rugby are like Doctor Who. Every couple of seasons, there's a new reincarnation.
It's like saying my favourite current CEO to my favourite current wife, isn't it?
So we're all hoping you're going to be our favourite Doctor Who. But your business experience in the business of rugby, your experience is phenomenal. It's just, that's a real who's who of a resume. What's very simply your favourite Rugby World Cup?
Again, it's a tough one because they're all fundamentally different. But I think it's difficult to look beyond 2011. I think a Rugby World Cup in New Zealand is like almost the Olympics in any other country. It's complete immersion, 100% buy-in from the community, you know, and everyone's talking about every aspect of it. So,
and that was quite exciting because you had the controversial Sam Warburton red card against France, the introduction of the tip tackle, and then New Zealand Australia semi-final where Quade Cooper had upset a few of the natives and was a target of their vitriol. And then a New Zealand France final, which is always a big draw for World Cups, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and France were the bogey team for New Zealand leading up to that World Cup, and you can tell the pressure of being the host nation. You know, the not having won it since the inception in '87, and they ground that out. And I mean, you look at it again and you watch that game again, you could argue that France really could have and should have won the game. Yeah. I mean, New Zealand were hanging on. Richie McCaw was on one leg. Yeah. Stephen Donald, the late addition of the squad, that shirt was too small and his midriff was showing. It had a bit of everything, that tournament. But I think, you know, with New Zealand winning it, just the knock-on effect for the next week in that country, and the lift was phenomenal.
So just to let you share, so I'm not picking on you guys all for the next hour, one of my most expensive life choices, and the boss lady's over in the audience over there, and that was around about the earthquake, Christchurch. And we were in Shanghai at the auction or charity auction, Christchurch fundraiser, and it's surprising how much money you can spend after a couple of litres of New Zealand wine. But it did enable us on a very high cash ticket to go to the New Zealand World Cup in 2011.
Totally worth it.
Well, apparently it was worth it.
You should have rode there. It wouldn't have taken you that long.
It would have been cheaper if we rode there.
Switch oceans.
So questions for you, Ross. Column A, column B. Where do you want to start?
Oh, you're going to stitch me up here, I can tell.
No. These are easy questions. If a Marine can get through...
Have you been answered two of them?
Wow. Where's this podcast going?
Column A.
Column A. Your favourite Northern Hemisphere team?
As in international or non-international?
Non-international.
I think as a Premiership team, Quins, just because of the association of being there during that transition between amateurism and professionalism. I mean, I was a policeman in London for 15 years and played for the Met Police in the amateur phase. So, I mean, Met Police is always going to be my club because I think, as we all know, camaraderie and rugby and being together and, you know, the guys, that's always going to be the number one. But as a high-profile professional club, Quins is going to always remain my team.
I remember playing against various police sides over the years. Felt like a few fisties. Did you ever indulge?
Might have been a little bit of banter.
All right.
My question was,
Inter-police games are the worst, trust me. Forget
no,
about playing a police team. You play two police teams against each other.
Things
Yeah.
get real raucous.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
didn't walk the beat in East London, did you? On that time, you didn't happen to meet Angus back.
He's a
then?
Cockney
He ran into
reject.
him on a couple
Don't
different
talk
sides.
about an East London.
South London, mate.
I'm South
South
London.
We'd never go east.
Yeah,
It's full of riffraff over there.
No, I was mainly West, and to be honest, you always get ribbed a little bit because being a rugby player and not recruited as such, but part of the career choice was at that stage playing for the Met in the amateur game. You were allowed to facilitate your shifts to be able to play. So we all got posted over to the west side of London, which, to be honest, not the roughest area of London, because Imbercourt, where they train, was there, so it made it easy for you to get the training and matches if you were stationed on the west side. So yeah, I can't say I was sort of there battling at the front side of
But on the front
policing
line.
in London.
Uh-huh.
All the time, sometimes, not all the time.
Okay, so next question, column A, column B.
Oh no, look at him. Just look.
I think he's just choosing.
He is,
regardless.
exactly.
I've got a list
Giving
of
us a semblance
prepared
of control.
questions. I'm not making
What
this
was
up.
the attendance of the game? In fact?
God, they're all easy. Column A or column B?
B. We'll go for a B this time.
All right, this technical one. Just taking a penalty kick, right? So kicking for 3-point penalty and it misses. What happens next?
Well, the ball's still live till it goes dead.
Right, so the ball's gone dead.
The ball's gone dead.
What would the
Then
referee? What's the option?
It's a 22 dropout.
Well done. Passed his rugby IQ test.
I was worried about that. I thought it was going to be a little tight.
That was the hardest
yeah.
question yet.
Yeah, I know. It's not bad, eh?
Yeah.
All right, Otis, how you going?
I'm doing well, thank
Okay,
you.
we know who you are. You don't need.
Yeah.
Otis is here. For those who are new in the audience, Otis is our resident US culture keeper. He's on limey prevention duty.
Yes.
Stops us getting too Anglo.
We've done a good job of balancing our
Yeah, I
ourselves,
noticed, yeah.
too, with the,
So column A or column B, Otis?
A.
What's your most memorable game or live stadium experience and why?
England versus the All Blacks, because I watched it in a pub in Wellington in 2003.
Did England win?
That
Because if not, we're
No.
not talking about it.
No.
they did win. Mind
No,
you, there was,
did they?
England were down to 13 men and
I was
held up
clearly
on
a
the
good
line.
pub
It
if
was
you can't
phenomenal.
remember the result.
2 yellow cards. Yeah, they were down to 13 men.
Who
I
were
just
New
remember the
Zealand or England?
experience.
Was it?
Yeah.
Is that back in the day we had police officers in the side?
That's when the Met police went pro.
I think there were. Yeah, don't.
Met police management team. Column A or column B, Otis?
Hey,
A again. Going to come back to this one. Your favourite rugby player or character in the history of the game?
we've already done that one.
Yeah, but
Give me another one.
All right, give me a favourite.
I mean, because it was Richie McCaw. Remember we talked about that.
I thought it was Cam Dolan. You're a fickle friend.
No. Cam's a friend. He's got potential.
Oh, okay.
He's not there yet.
All right, so your favourite Southern Hemisphere non-international team?
Crusaders, Canterbury, or not Canterbury, Christchurch, Crusaders.
And why?
Because the guy who really taught me how to coach, that's where he grew up, was in Christchurch.
Yeah.
And kind of pulled me into understanding of the game, and that was the style of rugby I learned about, was the way that the Crusaders
The
played.
Canterbury way.
Yeah.
What was your biggest learning?
Fundamentals, basics.
Build everything out from there.
Huh?
Build everything out from the
Oh, yeah,
fundamentals.
yeah. Do the fundamentals better than anybody else. And it's the same thing in the military, right? I mean,
absolutely.
do the fundamentals better than anybody else.
Yeah.
Then you can beat anybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. So I'm going to come right back around to Evan because I have to confess I'm a little bit in awe of you, to be honest.
in awe.
Well spotted.
Oh, well done. Well
We're here all
done.
night.
Well
We're
done.
here all
Well
night.
done. Yes.
And also, anyone in the audience who'd like to ask a question of Evan, because just to recap, he's world record holder rowing the Atlantic from the Canary Islands to Antigua in the Caribbean in a bathtub, we've just discovered. but with 3 other big hairy military dudes.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and where do you go? Where do you want to start? Because in my head is everything from just doing an endurance event like that, and I've done a few 5-6 days, but a 51 day in the middle of the wobbly oggy.
It's 50 days and 11 hours.
Oh, sorry, yeah,
35 minutes.
Yes.
50 days, 11 hours, 35 minutes in the
22
middle of the
seconds.
wobbly oggy with a bunch of dudes, and having to, was it 12 hours a day, rowing?
Yeah, so there's 4 guys, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
and you have 2 rowers on, 2 rowers resting,
Yeah.
and you row in 2-hour shifts, 24 hours a day. So it's 2 hours rowing, 2 hours resting, 24 hours a day. Or we coined the term, if you ain't rowing, you ain't going. So if that boat does not move, there's no outboard motor, there's no sail system. That boat does not move unless the waves and wind push it or if we're pulling on the oars.
And how do you prepare for that? Let's start emotionally and mentally. How do you get amped up for that?
Mentally, a bit of ignorance helps. Goes a long way. You know, not being willing, not quite
really knowing what
understanding
you're
now,
walking into.
not knowing what I know now about the ocean. Would definitely
Exactly.
was a big help. I think being in the right place ahead of time, and so taking on a challenge of this aptitude, and understanding where I was at in my life and being ready for the opportunity, and that's where it really started. So being in a good place where I was at with just work and life and family and mentally and emotionally, was being able to take the opportunity and ready to jump on it was a great place for me to start.
But you sort of have to walk out the door. You got to leave your job behind, leave your family, your kiddos behind.
Yeah.
And you're basically getting in a bathtub, and it's dangerous out there, and you might not be coming back from that.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile? And how does that compare with your military experience? Reconciling walking out the door with that idea when I see you in 52 months, 3 months. Oh, it's almost like going on deployment.
Totally. It was definitely understanding the why up front. And I think that was because you needed that. And I absolutely relied on that quite a few times as we were on the row because you get beat down on the row. And having that personal why. And for me, it was just, it was the 10-year anniversary of me being injured in Iraq, as you mentioned, and losing my best friend. So it was 10 years to, in 2009, I was injured at 19 years old and I watched my best friend die. And I was pretty physically injured. I had a mental injury because the traumatic brain injury, and then that emotional injury of watching my friend die. So I call that triple injury.
Because you were paralyzed for a while.
Yep. So my spinal accessory nerve was severed. So my left tricep and shoulder were paralyzed. So I could only bend my arm at the elbow for about 2 years, and it took a lot of recovery, as a lot of physical therapy, occupational therapy. And to overcome that, sports became a huge part of my life, later on to get through all of these injuries and without going into all the details, but rugby played a big part of that. And so 10 years following that injury, it was a great opportunity for me to say, all right, I need to remember what it's like to be injured and to show to myself and others that injury is not definitive and it's not the end.
Yeah.
And then I have a 1-year-old son, and he was about 7 months at the time when the opportunity came on. And I said, I want to be the example to my little boy in the home that you can go out and do whatever the hell you want, including row and ocean. So I had a lot of personal motivation.
So the physiotherapy of the left-hand drinking with seeing you 2 pints of Guinness ahead of the rest of us is obviously done well there.
I've had to overcompensate on the right, actually, so that's how I've managed.
So what about your physical preparation? Again, it's ignorance. You get in a rowing boat with no frills, no luxuries.
Yep.
And physically, in terms of preparing your body, but also physical needs and wants. Peeing and pooping, for example, and let's have a little go down that continuum. And time in gym versus when you're out on the Oggen, what's going on?
So you learn quite a bit early on that there's ocean rowing's kind of a small community, and so there's a lot of resource sharing, and information sharing. Yeah. And so you kind of learn quickly that there's no proven method to physically prepare for the row. You know that regardless of how good you are in physical shape, that you are going to break down. You just are going to physical wear and tear of working out for 12 hours a day for up to 60 days is you can't out-train that.
Yeah.
So you learn that it's going to become a mental game. Yeah. So the mental game is a much bigger piece of preparing for the row. So what I did to physically prepare was just work with a row coach.
Yeah.
So how do I make every stroke count? Because I'm going to have 1.5 million of them over the next 50 days. How do I make?
Did you know that number going on?
It's like the average number of a 3,000-mile row, which is the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge, is 3,000 nautical miles, which equates to roughly about 1.5 million strokes individually. So how could I make each of those strokes count was kind of my methodology of I can build up, I can add weight, I can do these things, but how do I make sure that each stroke and
Are
each
you, are you
pull-
scratching a 5-bar gate?
yeah, just right there on the side
On
of
the
the
side
boat.
of the boat?
One.
I'm at 5. Oh, yeah, man.
Oh, we got a little pedometer. I just wrote in it.
So
No,
that
no.
goes back to what I was just talking about earlier, is those fundamentals. So you were focused on the physical action
Yeah.
of the row, the rotation of the oar, and how
Yeah.
you pull all that and making that the most efficient that you could.
Yeah.
So how did you grade yourself as you were doing it? Did you grade each stroke? Did you review? How did y'all
So
sustain it?
This is really where in rugby, I think we've all had those times where you're out on the pitch and you're worn down and you're beat down and you've had 8 rucks in a row and you're tired and now you certainly don't want to go maul right now, and you get a bit of respite there. You find yourself kind of sliding back a little bit. You do these things and you realize on the rugby pitch, more than any other sport I've ever played, it's melding that mental and that physical and putting it together. And you realize that the mental aspect pushes you physically. Well, this row was that times 100. Is that you could not at certain times get your body to do what your mind wanted it to do because you're just worn down and you're in just this mental cavern, and so you're just trying to row as best you can. So you learn to kind of come to peace that I'm putting in the best effort I can for the moment, and that each stroke does count, but not beating yourself up when it's not the top stroke, and that you just have to mentally recover, and that mental aspect became really, really important. So, hey, I didn't do the best on this shift. I'm really going to focus on recovering and get my mind right again on this next 2 hours off so I can come back refreshed on my next 2 hours on.
Does it ever get to a point where it becomes almost a conditioned reflex? Or is it never, you never quite hit that comfort zone where you don't have to think about it?
Now, it's never perfect because you can't become conditioned to it because everything I learned even out here preparing for it just goes away on the ocean because the weather and the wind and the waves are pounding and hitting you so differently that you can get out on Cherry Creek Reservoir and have a nice smooth stroke with your row coach. Next thing you know, you're in 20-foot swells and you're bouncing up and down and this oar's in the water and this one's not. And then you're getting hit by a wave and you're not in your seat anymore. And every time you came out, it was like a new weather system or new something going on. And so you learn to be uncomfortable. And you realize that it's never perfect, and there was never a time on the water where we had waves pushing us the right way, the wind was giving us the right way. We were always trying to quarter the waves and then get hit wrong on the way, by the wind. And you just learn, and that's where it becomes a mental game, is that the situation's never perfect. There's never going to be an opportune moment. So how did we just capitalize in the worst, situations? And that's what it became, is how do we do the best in inopportune moments?
I remember doing survival training out in the ocean, and you just get dropped in the sea. I think they were sending me a message in the Navy because I got dropped in the Red Sea. I got dropped in the Atlantic. Maybe as a subliminal message.
Yeah.
When you're out there, it's just freaking lonely. And
Yeah.
when we were doing survival training, you basically, if you're not picked up in 3 days, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Because your body's just breaking down on every level.
Yep.
So just looking at that with that in mind, how do you cope with that? What are you doing for food, drinking water?
Yep.
Because I can't imagine you've got 1.5 million gallons of drinking water
No.
flown in by the US
Yeah.
government.
No, yeah. So the boat's made out of 5 layers of carbon fiber, so it's actually pretty light and very, very durable. So when we pull that boat out of the water, sitting on its trailer, it weighs about 500 to 600 pounds. We put 800 pounds of freeze-dried backpackers food on the boat.
On top of the weight of the boat.
On top of the weight of the boat. So 800 pounds of food alone, and that's you're shooting for about 5,500 calories a day.
Yeah.
And then we have a water maker, and that just desalinates the ocean water. So it would
That's over-
desalinate the water.
That's over a ton of weight.
Yep. And then you put
Including-
us plus
yeah.
gear on. So yeah, you're rowing about a ton and a half boat across the ocean. So yeah, it's actually funny because it starts real heavy, and as you get closer to Antigua, it starts getting real light. So
Well,
keep
then
your
it
food
handles
down.
differently, completely differently
Totally.
in the water, doesn't it?
Yeah,
once
yeah. And
get
you start
to that
you
point?
start getting closer, and you still have 150 meals left. We're like, well, I only need 50. Start pumping the extra meals out of the side of the boat. Whatever you can do.
And you're talking about desalination. How does that work?
So the water maker.
And I know it's extracting
Yeah.
salt from water before you.
Yeah.
Give me the standard
also,
marine answer.
It actually, it is actually a pretty in-depth process. I don't know the ins and outs of water makers, but these water makers draw a lot of power. So one of the hardest things you have to do, that water maker is your lifeblood on the boat, because freeze-dried food takes water to rehydrate, and so you need to drink you're using about 10 to 12 liters of water a day per person. and that water maker can make about 10 liters in an hour. And so you have to store water in water blivets, but the water maker draws all your power down. So you can only run that about an hour a day. And we started having power issues from the day we left. So our solar panels were only charging our batteries about halfway, and only half the panels were working. And so we had to get very disciplined from the get-go on making sure we were running that water maker at the peak times of the day, so we're getting the most sun, not using personal electronics and things that help you in that mental game, because you can't waste energy, not running the power at night. Yeah. So the water maker more or less just uses a pump and a motor. It sucks water up through a membrane, through a couple filters, and it just kicks out most of the salinity of the water. Yeah. And then you get this like little trickle. So it's a little hose and it's just droplets. It puts about 10 liters in an hour, give or take, into fresh water.
And mate, I'm still a little bit want to go out on a date with you, right? Because it's off the charts.
It's romance.
There's a little romance. It's warming up in my cold heart.
Get it going. Yeah.
Luxuries. Were you allowed any kind of luxuries?
Luxury is such a subjective term.
Yeah, well, what's your luxury? Apart from Talisker.
God, there's no luxuries, So actually, I'll talk about music, So you are on there and you're rowing for 2 hours on, 2 hours off for 50 days. You run out of things to talk about, and you're in those moments with each other too where you don't want to talk. Like, I'm in a bad mood.
For marriage.
Yeah, you're in a bad mood. Like, we just don't want to talk, and so I had like a bunch of music and podcasts downloaded. But I use Spotify Premium, so you download them offline and all that. Well, about 3 weeks into the row, I get this notification on my phone, and it says, you need to hook up to the internet so we can verify your subscription. And until you do that, you don't get any music. I lost all of my music like 3 weeks into the row. And then there I am left with just my own personal dark thoughts for, the middle of the night when my partner doesn't want to talk to me. So that was...
so what kind of team prep did you do? The four of you.
Yeah.
How much effort did you put together before you actually got on the boat?
Quite a bit. So our organization's Fight or Die, and I guess we should talk about this, is Fight or Die is a veteran nonprofit based out of Colorado here, and that's what we do. We will send U.S. veterans to row in the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge. So we're veteran focused, and we're really focused on veteran mental health and reintegration. So we actually really ran the gambit of preparation. Our team was all spread out. So we had one guy's up in Alaska, one's in Wyoming, one's in Texas, and I'm located here. So the physical preparation was really done spread out. We went down to Mobile, Alabama for 3 weeks with the boat, and that's where we retrofitted the boat, got all of our gear, and did all of our training hours. One of the biggest things we did to help prepare is partnered with Denver University's Military Center of Sturm Center of Military Psychology. It's the only program in the USA where doctoral students in psychology can get trained specifically for military psychology when they graduate. So we worked with their team of faculty and students, and we worked on the mental aspect, and we worked on things like team dynamic, and so overcoming conflict resolution, boredom, sleep, these sort of things to actually meld as a team and as to help prepare individually. So we were assigned a team coach and then individual coaches to help prepare, which was a huge advantage, I think, for us.
Yeah. Were all three of you Marines, or
2 Marines were on the boat? Okay. Air Force, not Air Force, Navy, and Navy and Army. That just rolled off the tongue. I don't even know why.
Just because you're inclusive.
Yeah. I don't know of any U.S. Air Force veteran that's rode the ocean yet.
You had the Navy guy on there for the brains.
Yeah, he was the team captain.
The dead weight anchor.
Yeah. We had a couple mutinies, but we kept them.
I'd like to open to the floor, actually, to see if we've got anything.
Yeah.
Anyone on the floor got a question for Evan?
Hi, Darby.
Hi, Evan. What was the transition like coming back after an experience like that and stepping back into the world of excessive commodity and all of those things?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to, for the camera,
yeah. Please,
so the question from the floor was, what was the transition like after that experience and basically stepping back into normal life?
Yeah. It was an incredible experience, and that's actually, I think I'm still processing this row and will continue to process it for a few more months. There's nothing you can do on this planet to remove yourself from our chaotic lives like doing this row. You can go camping for a week and turn off your cell phone, but you're going to come back. So I did 6 weeks of no emails, no phone calls, no TV, no social media. You remove yourselves from all these inputs, and you're just out there reconnected with nature. Not the most friendly nature, but you're just kind of reconnected with yourself and nature in this very, very incredible way. And it was from the minute we landed in Antigua, I immediately felt overwhelmed again, and it was overwhelming. And I noticed just being back and turning my phone on and seeing how quickly life moves, or how many like micro decisions have to be made in your day that you just put on autopilot. I mean, I just felt stressed out in a way. I was like, wow, like I'm already feeling a little stressed, and I'm still on vacation in beautiful Antigua. And so that's something I really learned on how to be kind of deliberate about what I'm pouring my energy into, and what we put on autopilot that are just kind of stressors in our lives. Or, I'm still adjusting to being back, and I've been back for about 3 weeks. So just taking it a day at a time and really focusing on the things that matter now. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is don't let my attention get sucked into these things that I place importance on that aren't truly important to me, that I did before I left. So it's been a very kind of life-changing experience.
I'd love to ask you, one of my favourite rowing quotes is a guy, Steve Redgrave. I think he's the only rower that's 4 gold medals in consecutive Olympics. And
Wow.
there's a great quote of his after, I think, the Sydney Olympics. After his 3rd gold medal, he's absolutely exhausted, obviously. And live interview, and he basically says, if anybody ever sees me in a boat again, you can effing shoot me. It wasn't bleeped, obviously, and it was,
Yeah.
and of course he then went on and got his 4th gold medal in the next Olympics. Similar feeling about being in a boat?
Oh my God. I cannot tell you how many times I sat on shift with my partners and being like, we're idiots. Why did I do this? I should have stayed home. This is the worst thing. Like, I'm stupid. Like, this is hands down the worst thing I've ever done. I got off the boat and I'm like, I'd do it again.
It wasn't that
I don't know
bad.
what's wrong with me. One of my platoon sergeants from the Marines, right before I left, he's like, what are you doing? And I was texting with him. I was like, yeah, it's going to be a pretty crazy adventure. He's like, Evan, I've tried to figure it out, but, guys like you and me, we're just meant to suffer. And so I don't know what it is. There's clearly something wrong with me, but I'm already trying to think about the next thing.
Well, I'm curious because I can think of times I've been in some similar, although not in the middle of the ocean, some similar situations. And with the mates that you're with, you start to talk about those first things, or you start to visualize. And mine was always it always went back to chocolate cake and vanilla ice cream.
Oh yeah.
So did y'all have those deep? How good that piece of cake and those sort of conversations.
I'm gonna first say I'm not a foodie, but I have never had such excruciatingly detailed and in-depth, lengthy conversations about food like I did on that row. I mean everything. I don't think we left anything on the table on that row of what we wanted to eat and how we wanted to approach it and when we were gonna eat it. It becomes just like one of those things that you just dominates you. I mean, we're eating freeze-dried food, and the best thing you can do to even make those things enjoyable is use boiling water to rehydrate them. Well, boiling water is probably the most dangerous thing you can do on a boat in the middle of the ocean. So we ate them cold the entire time. And we really got into it about some food.
What was your first meal when you got off the boat then?
They had some hamburgers waiting for us on the dock.
Hamburgers, of course.
Got another question. Chet?
Your story reminded me of some of my times of navigation, especially getting into it, you start not trusting it or conflicting over, you obviously had to navigate by GPS.
Mm-hmm.
Were there times that you didn't trust the GPS, or you started questioning where the heck you were, or that sort of thing?
So yeah, for the camera there, the question is essentially about navigation and do you trust your equipment or your instinct, particularly when you're in the heart of the row?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we trusted the equipment. I'll just put that there because we have no choice. I mean, we have charts, paper charts as backups and things like that. But when it comes to land navigation, if you don't know anything about it, you need a point of reference to be able to use a chart. So we had to trust the GPS that it was giving us the right location. Yeah. Well, we didn't bring a sextant or anything like that.
Angus has a sextant.
I've got a
Do
sextant.
you know how to use it?
Yeah.
Wow.
I used it down in the Middle East, down there, yeah.
That's incredible.
Thing is, good thing about it, I was in the Suez Canal. You can only go one of 2 ways.
That's right.
You're going up or you're going down. Yeah, we had a little bit more options. What comes to happen, though, is you have a starting point and an end point. And so when you start the race, you got a lot of miles. You can go up and down, right? As you get closer, you have to get much, much closer because now you're trying to hit a small point in the middle of the ocean. And so you have to get much more detailed and much more strict on your path. And that's what the row's about, is it's really trying to use weather systems and understand what's going to hit you and where you're at to make decisions. So, hey, this big weather system's coming up. do we throw out the para anchor, which we're going to stop rowing for the next 12 hours, but it's going to blow us 20 miles south, and we just can't afford that southern movement. So that's what a lot of it was about, was kind of making those decisions on how we're approaching where we're going. And that one, what would really suck is that we had satellite phones, so we could call back home, we could get weather reports and things like that. You know, you get on the phone with your wife, and she's like, "What are you doing? Why? You guys need to row faster, babe. Your guys are so far north, and you guys should probably be a little more south." You know, you get people start questioning the things you're doing. You're like, "You don't know what it's like out here." Yeah, so there's this awesome app called YB Races where you can follow all the boats.
I was tracking him.
Yeah, you can
and
see how far
judging
you're
him
going
from day one.
Yeah,
I was doing what your wife was doing.
Yeah,
actually. I was
totally.
going, come on, Evan, seriously?
Yeah,
I'm backing your horse.
Yeah, I know.
Where are you, mate?
It's hilarious. It's such an interesting thing because everybody in the world knew where we were and what we were doing, except for us.
So I'm going to take one more from the audience. Tom, yeah.
So, Evan, you said you had a traumatic brain injury. What recommendations or advice could you give to other people that are challenged with that or trying to move forward with their life?
I think that's an awesome segue because so we're talking about mental health issues in both veterans and professional athletes. So in terms of your TBI, traumatic brain injury, what are your recommendations?
Yeah. So we like to talk about road and ocean, and like I said, we're a 501c3 veteran nonprofit here in Denver, and we're rowing the Atlantic Ocean to help raise awareness and kind of spark some things in veterans to get them to row what we call your personal ocean. So the personal ocean is getting out there and seeking treatment and seeking help. Marcus Aurelius' quote was saying, "Reject your sense of injury, and the injury itself disappears." Injuries require treatment, and you don't have to get sucked into being the victim of an injury, but you do need to get the best help and find the resources you can to get out and address injuries. If you blow out your ACL, you're not going to run back onto the pitch. You're going to go see an orthopedic surgeon, you're going to repair your ACL, and you're going to address that injury. And traumatic brain injuries and mental health issues are the same as any other physical injury. And so I rode my personal ocean before I could go row the actual ocean. And that's what we want veterans and we want everyone else to do, is address mental health and traumatic brain injuries as you would any other injury. Go find the right resources, find the right support systems, and address them. And, there's treatment options. So they can be crazy, right? No injuries the same, especially when it comes to mental health or brain injuries, but there's experts out there that are, here to support us and make sure we get the help we need.
But basically go and find help. Yeah. Don't sit on it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, it can get worse, right? You don't treat the ACL and you go run on it, it's going to get worse.
Cool. Awesome. So
there's also, in Denver, there's also the Invictus Project, which I'll have to connect you with them when we're done.
Yeah, they treat EOD guys. I'm actually familiar with them. They do incredible, incredible stuff.
They're doing some incredible stuff with existing technology. It's one of those, the technologies that they're using, the treatments they're using, all existed. They've all been in separate stovepipes, and they've just put them together and making huge headways in TBI and PTS treatments.
Absolutely.
So, Evan, thanks. I'm going to switch gears now because we spend some time with Ross. But last question, because everything has to come back to rugby in the world.
Yeah.
Why rugby? And think about this, just not for us, but because we all know about rugby in the room, but for American consumer audience.
Yeah.
Tell us, package the game.
Yeah. I would not have rowed the ocean unless I'd started playing rugby. So when I left the military in 2011, it's not mental health, it's not TBIs, it's not these things that are damaging to veterans, because they affect some veterans, not all. 100% of veterans will leave the military and go through reintegration issues of some kind. When I left the military, I went through those things coupled with, some mental health issues and stuff like that. But when I really started having success again is when I had a buddy who was in the Marines with me, who I'd known since high school, bring me out to rugby practice with the Denver Harlequins.
Right.
And that lost sense of community and kind of fun that I lost when I left the military, I found again in rugby. You can go to the bar and I can meet another Marine like Chet. Hey, you're a Marine. Let's talk about it for 20 minutes. I can go to a bar anywhere in this country or in this world and say, hey, you play rugby? I play rugby. And we can sit there and I have a new friend. So rugby is that sense of community that I left the military. I lost that. I found it in rugby again. So when I was going through, addressing my own personal ocean, I was playing rugby. So I was out having fun. I wasn't just lost in the depths of, the struggles I had. I was having fun out of community, out of support system. So I'm a firm believer that, rugby's that community and beyond just the sport and the game.
It's an integration method.
Is the integration, It's just getting back with other veterans and other people and having like a great community. You can't just focus on the issues. I can't just hang out with a team of doctors, right? Who can do that? Nobody can do that. But you can get out and play a game and learn something new and, that was a foundation for me to have other successes in my life. Like having success in rugby helped me have success in other places in my life.
Awesome. And we like to say, rugby is populated by awesome people, and you're a classic example of that, Evan. A fantastic story, but just switching from one awesome person to another. Ross?
Listen, before you even start, you told me we were going to finish with Evan and like it. Everyone's going to be bored now. He gives this great story, and then here's Ross. Follow Evan. Yeah, thanks.
Well, yeah, you know how the world works. It gets tipped on its axis. I was worried that you're so interesting that we'd lose it.
Right. Yeah, right.
So, but where I'd like to open the bat in with you, Ross, because obviously you want to talk about USA rugby, but I'd love to know about managing a World Cup. And you've managed 3. And I can't even it's like trying to wrap my head around. There's another bromance evolving here.
You want to switch spots?
No, we're good for now. Is how do you manage a World Cup? Where do you start?
Yeah, good shout. I mean, let's be clear before we even start there. Managing a World Cup when you've got a tangible goal at the end of it, and you've got structure that you've got to work around, 48 matches, 20 teams across a 6-week period. Yeah, you've got a whole bunch of hurdles to get, but you've got an end game.
Yeah,
I think so much easier than the CEO of an NGB role now, without a doubt.
Really?
The complications, the moving pieces.
Yeah.
But I mean, the World Cup was, for me, was an ongoing learning experience from day one. I think I was fortunate enough to almost fall into the role. As I said, I was a policeman for 15 years. Started looking at, due to catastrophic knee injury, looking at rugby or policing operations around rugby matches, initially at Twickenham, and then a bunch of other rugby entities around West London. And I always saw myself and was perceived as a generalist. So I had a great period of time at Quins, and obviously we can come on to that later, but every day was a learning curve.
Right.
And I think for me, the first thing that I found coming out of almost the institutionalization, it's a long word, isn't it? Can I win the longest word?
So far.
For the institutionalization.
You get another pint.
Into applying common sense.
Yeah.
And so, the first thing I did at Quins was understand everybody's role.
Yeah.
From the groundskeeper, what does he do? He just cuts the grass. It's so much more complicated than that. To the stewards manning the car park, very easy. You get punters after a game. Oh, I had to sit in the car for, half an hour trying to get into the car park. No idea about the poor person at the front that's getting lambasted by somebody around.
Yeah.
So understand, the parameters and the issues that everybody deals with. And all I did was try and apply that generalist behaviour. We can go on to what's the template of a World Cup? Right? What issues have we got to face? How do we go about it? And really, the first World Cup I was involved with was in 2003. To be honest, 2003 was the first grown-up Rugby World Cup.
In what sense?
In that it had the proper structure, it had the background. Like, Ross, can you come and I went to World Rugby thinking I was going to spend months getting an understanding of how things had happened before.
Yeah.
There was one very obscure Microsoft project planning document from South Africa in '95. That was it.
Wow.
And there was this host union agreement, which is a big chunk of a document that didn't really have service level agreements attached on the back of it. So. Right. Me thinking, I'm coming into this, I've seen it on TV, it's the pinnacle of rugby. It was still amateur at that point. And I think the clubs and the professional clubs, especially in the UK, we'd learned and we had become more professional. At that stage, the international game was still pretty much governed by amateur, by an amateur ethos and a volunteer aspect to it. So let's put some structure in place. Let's make sure we need to know what happens and then just build out from there. And for me, getting dumped in Australia as a single guy, I mean, I was the only person with World Rugby that had any responsibility. They just come off the back of a hugely successful Olympics in Sydney 2000.
Yeah.
A number of the event heads from the Olympics had come across to help the Australian Rugby Union in putting together the World Cup. But, the issue there was they were very Olympic in their approach. The Olympic ultra structured.
Right.
You know, everything, they've got literally manuals in every area of delivery. Oh, we have to do this. We have to set up a city office in Townsville 6 months before. Why? And it's not, you can't just take what worked for the Olympics, which is single city multi-sport,
Yeah.
to a multi-city single sport event. It's fundamentally different. So constant learning for me, and you know, I try to apply that to everything.
Yeah.
And that continued all the way through. Every geography, every country had different issues to deal with.
Yeah.
And well, let's just stick with the end goal. Where do we want to get to? It's like coaching rugby, isn't it? If you're going to be a coach, what are your outcomes? What do you want from this training session? What do you want from this game? Same application.
Without upsetting any specific host, can you share any of those issues or challenges?
I don't think you're going to upset any host, because I think they'll all admit at the end of it that it's, I think, you know, the Australians, the problem was, nah, don't do that in Australia, mate. Don't do that here, mate. You know, they come through that successful major event, and it was incredibly difficult to build that trust, because everything had to be, you know, it's sort of waffling. To me, then it's not the Australian Rugby World Cup. It's a Rugby World Cup that's in Australia, and then apply that to all the others. So they all had issues.
Yeah.
Australia, very similar to the issues that we have in the US. Rugby union, very much an elitist sport, private fee-paying schools, you know, were the main participants that were pushing through players. And it certainly was nowhere in the top 2 or 3 sports, cricket, AFL, even soccer participation from the youth side. It was a minority sport. They had to build awareness. Nobody knew the thing was happening until about 6 months before, or really cared. So the Australians, it was raising awareness and getting them to buy in, and using the major event ethos, if you like, to build the energy within supporting Australia. And I think you know, again, going into semantics and details, but part of the marketing, the first time I'd really understood what marketing was, is, well, how do we get people to buy in? Because all they wanted to do was watch Australia. So it was originally a Cyndi Lauper song that was a US Australian country artist called Casey Chambers, True Colours.
Yeah.
And it was about, support your national team, but if they're not playing, buy into the fact that in Launceston in Tasmania, Uruguay are playing Russia.
Got a world-class event on that roster.
And so get behind the sport. It's a sports event. It's not just about Australia.
Did you have to interact with the coaches? So when you're dealing with teams, where's your interaction lie? Is it managers or coaches?
It's through the team managers. I mean, you have set meetings at certain periods outside of the World Cup. You have recce's, you know, that team managers come out of, and generally the head coach and the team manager, the 1 year out is, you almost have a week with everyone together going through where you are with the planning stage. But, you know, it's called the team services manager now. So and then it was me and the local Australians. Now there's a much better, stronger structure that, you know, you deal with those individual stakeholders within the event.
So the tabloid headline is the Rugby World Cup is like the 3rd biggest event in the world behind Soccer World Cup, Summer Olympics. Is that true? And if so, what does that mean exactly?
It is true, but you know, you've got to look at the phrasing of the question. Like most times, like the referee, try or no try, or is there any reason I can't award the try? It's
hey, we can't talk about referees. We're trying to keep the show up.
But it's the whole, you know, it really is a case of just I don't know whether going a bit blank with the question, but I think it's really, you know, it's really taking what's there and then adapting it around it.
Yeah.
Let me maybe rephrase it a little bit, because what I'm really curious about, as you were running it, who was your client? You know, who were you selling to? Were you selling to the coaches, the players, the locals? You know,
I think like any, the priority should always be give the best platform for the teams to perform to the best of their ability. Mm-hmm. So, same as the Olympics, same as the Soccer World Cup, same as any major event. You know, if it's going to be successful, the teams have to have what they need to be able to perform, from a training environment all the way through to the venues and, you know, the team hotels and the food. But again, you can't you have to look after them, but you need, if it's going to be a successful event and you get buy-in from the event, it has to be marketed, and you have to get the buy-in. And I don't think, that was one of the things that was incredible about Japan, because I think they showed more than anything is that from a non-traditional rugby nation, they got buy-in from the country and the community that just took that event to another level altogether.
So would you consider almost the host nation, that the population of the host nation almost as partners then from the World Rugby view, and your real client is the rugby players that are competing then? That's I never thought about it that way, but that makes great sense, because they're putting in all the work, right? The host nation.
And it's making sure there's a point of difference, as we touched on before, between what is an annual test match or what happens within the rugby environment in that, in that geography or that host union, and making it fundamentally different. Because, we got to where we got to, and you asked that question at the opening, Angus, which was, the one of which of the ones I was involved was my favourite, was the engagement from New Zealand. But that was hard.
Yep.
Because I remember going to Christchurch before the earthquake, and we just launched the pools and the matches. And when you run a ticketing strategy, first and foremost, you want to try and group tickets together. Yep. So, they were just packages. And I remember speaking to people in Christchurch, and I don't want to go and see Uruguay versus Russia, because that's nothing as good as the Crusaders game.
Or old Uruguay and Russia,
eh? Classic. Yeah.
So why do I want to go and watch that?
Yeah.
And, I think a number of people here, if you've watched the game with a New Zealander, it's not the most enjoyable experience.
Any Kiwis in the room?
Because there isn't.
Marcus in here.
There is an over-analysis of everything, because their knowledge of the game is so deep.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
constant criticism. Oh, that's terrible. The referee, look at it. Instead of just engaging in the experience, and if things aren't going well for the All Blacks, and I've said this a number of times, they were almost educated to sing and support and get behind your team, because they're normally not like that.
Yeah.
Had they not got behind that New Zealand team in that final, France would have beaten them.
Yeah.
And to me, that was building that due to the build-up.
Do you know, that's really funny, because when we were down there, my better half actually turned round and lectured the 6 Kiwis sitting behind us on their behaviour in the semi-final. And I was just, this is it's not going to end well, because Her Majesty's given them all the finger wag. And like, you should be ashamed of yourselves, your language, your behaviour, those poor boys out on the field. And I was going, this is just, oh my God, because I was hearing all their diatribe, and it's going, yeah, fair enough. But you know what was really funny? They went, yes, Mum. Sorry, Mum. We're really sorry. We understand where you're coming from. So I think you need to get her on board with your engagement strategy in the future. She's more of a stick than a carrot. But
somebody's got it. Somebody's got it.
Exactly. Nothing wrong with a bit of stick every now and then.
So I got a great question here then whilst we're on mega events. Could you explain how they're used to spike visibility of the game, and in terms of long-term participation, and what are your biggest learnings from not just those World Cups, but also the Sevens World Cup that was here in San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, legacy. Legacy is a word that's thrown around major events and has been for years, and always comes under criticism, because legacy basically means what happens after.
Yeah,
it's never going to work unless you put the work in before.
Yeah.
To get the legacy from it. And Australia's a good example, is they had a huge opportunity for engagement at that event and talked about legacy, but never really did anything about it. And the profile of the game, and if you're brutally honest, when you look at the game in Australia and even some of the current issues they're going through, they struggle to build a firm legacy, which any legacy has to be from the grassroots and the base up. With the right stakeholders, and have a plan in place, and ensure that in doing so that the infrastructure's there, that the knock-on and the feel-good factor from the event then translate into increased participation and numbers. The other thing about an event and a territory it's in, and you've already seen it in Japan, which helps, is if the team's successful. I don't know, you take the England example after 2003, the kick on in participation, the Cup doing a tour around the clubs afterwards. So success of the team, even success of the host team in Japan, their national University Championship had 60,000 people at the Tokyo Stadium a few weeks ago. Just they're still living off that, and they put things in place to allow the top league in Japan, the university structure, which is very strong in Japan and always has been for a number of years, to make sure that it wasn't just a one-off. And they've got fixtures laid out over the next couple of years that will keep that momentum going.
Keep the momentum, just before we switch, because I'd like to get into the governance subject, but I just want to see any questions from the room around World Cup management.
So what are the opportunities or chance for USA Rugby to host the World Cup 2023 that's being talked about in World Rugby?
So just to repeat again for the camera, what are the opportunities or the realities of the USA hosting a World Cup?
Again, brutally honest, we need to sort ourselves out first and foremost. We're going through some struggles, which we can touch on in a minute. As a union, and a lot of them are growing pains for sure. But we're not going to be entrusted with the jewel in the crown unless we get ourselves sorted, and we've got a little bit to go to achieve that. I think if you look at it strategically, again, I had a number of meetings when I was out there in Japan. I think there's a genuine desire that, to replicate what happened in Japan with regard to long-term investment in the US from World Rugby to help and unlock a new territory. Rugby struggles globally, the complete opposite of soccer. It's not the global game. If you look at the revenues that come into the game, if you look at the French league and the English Premiership, and if you look at the TV and media rights from the Six Nations World Cup, but 90 odd% of the cash that comes into the game comes from the UK and France.
Wow. So
it's dominated by them, and it will shrivel up and die unless there is more globalization of the game. Japan's a key market. World Rugby identified Japan, Brazil, Russia, Germany, and the US as key targets to market a few years ago. I think they're going through a new strategic plan. Undoubtedly, the media market in the US is something that, again, we've all been involved in rugby in the US. There's been people jumped in, think, we'll make some cash out of the US just by, we'll host a Super Rugby game here, or we'll do this, we'll do that. That isn't going to work unless the infrastructure's there, and it has to be a long-term plan. So, there is a desire to host. There's a desire globally from other countries to host, because ultimately everyone will benefit off the US market if it becomes successful. So, yes, there is a huge opportunity, but we have to get everyone together, and we have to get everyone rowing in the right direction. Because we're not doing that. We're dysfunctional. We're broken as a rugby community across the US, whether you like it or not. I've made mistakes over the last year and a half since I've been involved, no doubt. But it's not just about individual mistakes and individual errors. I think collectively we have to go back to those rugby values and build on. That's one of the most frustrating things I notice. We've got this great game, we've got these values, and we're all for this great game. They're not displayed. When you get to the point of some of the blinkers that are on different people, it has to be from the top down. You have to have a community-based pyramid. You have to have successful national teams. They've got to mold together properly. If we don't all buy in and do it together, then we're never going to host the World Cup, and the sport will never realize its potential in the US.
What's
Before we shift, are you shifting to governance? Because I just wanted to jump
No, I've got
because you said something earlier that I thought was really, really fascinating, and I wanted to dive into it just a touch more. Was that the World Cups were very finite, because you had a structure, you had a time.
From a World Rugby perspective.
Yes,
sure.
Exactly. So, which means that on the outside, as World Rugby and as a national governing body, you can't look at that finite thing, so it becomes more infinite. And there's Simon Sinek wrote a great book, The Infinite Game. And so how do you shift that focus as that leadership at the get this project done to sustain the growth of the game worldwide?
So again, politics are always interesting, and Gus Pichot, who's has been around as the vice chair for the last few years, a lot younger than the number of the administrators in the game. But he's created a dynamic that is really that has to change. I think everyone's buying into that now. And, someone like Bill Beaumont, who's the current chair, I think has also got into it. So I think you have gone through that sort of agitation phase, and the realization you're 100% right is World Rugby. If things are going to be successful, there has to be a strategy and there has to be a plan, and it has to be a long-term plan to do it. So they're moving away from the finite nature, because you're 100% right. When I was involved, we were assessing bids and we're assessing where to host World Cup. It was all massively risk averse, because everyone that's there that's making the decision doesn't want to make a wrong decision. Oh, well, there's a risk if we go over here, so let's just keep putting it in the same places. Bernard Lepasse, who was the chair of World Rugby at the time, got a bit of criticism for pushing so hard for Asia and Japan. And in doing so, those events were twinned. So World Rugby awarded 2015 in England and 2019 in Japan at the same time to allow a element of risk taking, because you could offset one against the other.
Wow.
There may be an indication that in the meeting in Japan, World Rugby have gone out and publicly said that they are awarding 27 and 31 at the same time. You can't get a better indication that they want to look at a new market with potentially an established market during this 2-year cycle. So the indicators are there of long-term growth and long-term strategy. And, it's certainly one of my major objectives when I took this job on 18 months ago was to leave a legacy potentially of a hosting of a World Cup. And I'm certainly going to do whatever I can to get through this and then to get into that process. But I think it's far by a done deal.
I think it's really interesting the way World Rugby is, if they continue that pattern, is hedging their bets with like
and you understand
said.
it. I mean,
Yeah,
literally,
yeah.
the Rugby World Cup currently is the major driver of revenue that goes into the grants that allows them to grow and govern the game across the world. So you can understand there's a risk of not generating the cash that they need to as an event.
Just going to put a break on that because I want to just go to the room. A couple of questions. Any questions for now on World Cup management or similar?
Just touching back on writing the ship before we get to the other side. What would you say would be the overarching goal that the rugby union needs to unite behind? Or what's that overarching message to turn us around?
So just again for the camera, so you kindly reference the fact we need to get we're all on nautical terms today. Get the ship going, sailing in the right, rowing in the right direction, rowing together. Yeah,
How do we get to Antigua?
We're all going to
yeah, exactly. So in order to get World Rugby confident in us hosting over here, was your number one priority you think we all, as a collective community, we need to work on?
Maybe it's an oversimplification, but remove the blinkers and get everyone to accept responsibility.
Yeah.
That everything's interlinked from, the early youth engagement, through to interscholastic associations with high school setups, through to, the collegiate landscape is just so complex in the US, and that's a whole other subject matter about should we be chasing NCAA? Undoubtedly, the women's game have and Naira doing a great job in building towards that. That could potentially unleash, much as soccer did, with the women's game being the trailblazer for the men's game to follow. We've got an incredibly strong culture of rugby within the women's game in the US for sure. It's really just each of us accepting our responsibilities and not get blinkered by what's right in front of you. Just think about the bigger game. One of the issues I have with the US is that it's a huge country, it's a massive geography. We've got some big numbers. Even the official registered number players and the unofficial players. There's
the official registered number of players is the same as Wales and Scotland combined,
and it's
probably
not,
more.
And I think we all know it's not realistic to the number of people that are involved with rugby out there either.
Yeah.
You look at Sports Fitness Association of America every year, they come out with rugby's this biggest exponential growth. There's 2 million plus fans. There's 500,000 players.
Wow.
They're using different sources and different stats around the interest.
Yeah.
Our physical registered players And I think we've shot ourselves in the foot for so long about being overly anxious about eligibility, who can do what, who can play what. Oh, I want him in my D3 national championship. Therefore, you played for that opposing team last year. Therefore, you're not allowed to play again this year because you're cup tied. Rubbish.
Yeah.
Get the boots on. Allow people to play
Get
the
rid of
game
some
more.
of those exclusion
So let's
zones.
remove the boundaries.
Yeah.
And let's all buy into getting people involved in the game. And it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
But that's what we've got to do is everyone accept responsibility, not point the finger or the gun or whatever you want to the national governing body.
Yeah.
But there are not Chinese walls, Chinese ceilings, or paper ceilings. Each individual player is registered to the national office, and the amount of requests that we deal with on a day-to-day basis with an individual player that has an issue, whereas any other rugby environment involved in, you're a player, you're registered to your club. Your club looks after you first and foremost. Then whatever region you're playing is, there's these steps of responsibility, which some of the bigger things we've talked about strategically in the last 18 months that we're now forcing ourselves into doing is decentralized responsibility. Provide some tools at the national office around training and education, more referees, more coaches, support mechanisms, but allow the sport to be managed from a more decentralized basis.
Yeah.
And then hopefully it will kick on and we'll hit that tipping point and we'll get to where we should be on the world stage.
Well, that does.
I love your comment though, your point, your focus of just get the boots on.
Yeah.
Just why not?
It's
Why
so
are we stopping
restricted.
somebody from playing?
So restricted.
Let them play. Put the boots on. Go play.
And that segues nicely into governance because I never thought I'd be in sports admin ever professionally. And here I am up to my eyebrows in the youth high school game, and I have some empathy.
Have you got any eyebrows?
That's about all he's got.
Hey, grass doesn't grow on a busy street, guys. And it's tough. There's stuff. I can't imagine what you go through, because I know just coming here. And Colorado's the size of a country. Its landmass is almost identical to New Zealand, with a population almost identical to New Zealand. And just on the youth and high school side, when you look at league regulation, player registration, safe sport, it's actually phenomenally stressful. And part of that stress is because people think you're public property. So they have rights of access to you 24/7. There's no more boundaries anymore in civility and human nature. It was a really weird experience. So coming back to you're the new incarnation of Doctor Who, and you'll see.
There's a telephone box.
Yeah, you can't get back in it. And you've just walked out into this.
By the way, that's a very UK reference. I'm going to have to call.
Oh, sorry,
Limey,
culture
Limey.
keeper.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It does show on BBC America.
Yeah, nobody watches that.
The propaganda channel. So just share with us, I don't know, your main challenge, or actually for our community, what is governance all about? Let's go there. Start at the beginning.
We sort of talked about it, and I was laughing at one of the analogies that Evan used earlier. If you knew before you started, would you have done it again? I mean, so many people have asked me that. Completely different set of environments. But, if you knew what you were in for before you took the job, would you still have taken it? And yes, of course I would. I mean, it's tough, it's hard, but I'm determined to try and find our way through this. But the biggest challenge is unification.
Yep.
As we said, it really is. It's about trying to get that buy-in to the bigger picture, and that's why again, coming back to the World Cup, if we can get something out there that we can really use as a fishing hook to let's do this, let's make sure that we use that to spread the game, geographies, stakeholder management all the way through. The MLR is only in its third year. I think it's done some great stuff, and I'm a huge supporter of the MLR, and took a little bit of time even with that management group to initially, we don't need you. What do we need to be sanctioned for? We can do it on our own. This is America. We don't need governance from outside the world. We can create our own league. And
So why is sanctioning important?
I think sanctions is important because it makes sure you've got the rails in there. Even if you look at general liability,
Yeah.
you know, the rules of the game, the governance of the game from World Rugby that come all the way through. You know, there is a global nature to it. There's the continuity and consistency to get that buy-in from your national team. That's obviously part of World Rugby all the way through. So it you know, it is the game of rugby. It is a global game, and the sanctioning of it, the rules, the referees, the liability of playing within those rules is the first key component. I think, to your point earlier, and I think we've all talked about it. It also gives you some guide rails to ensure that there is unity in everything and consistency in everything that you do as part of it. So
That all comes back to what Otis and everyone were talking about: get your fundamentals right.
yeah,
We build out quality from a
it
fundamental.
is. But I mean, even from the MLR's perspective, and I think we've got a really good relationship with them. We've got the sanctioning agreement, and they understand it, so much more. Even from things like visa applications.
Yeah.
I know the whole how many foreign players should you have, shouldn't you have, but currently, very tough to get a visa unless for an overseas player unless you show outstanding ability from overseas that's not there in the US. And so the letters that we write in support of players coming in and coaches and administrators that are going to help raise the game. But to me, they're seeing that now, that we are helpful in that process.
Yep.
If you look at what we said, if we are going to go down a World Cup route, the legacy elements of the geographies where MLR teams exist, engaging there, using what they're doing.
Yep.
I think Colorado do a great job with Luke, obviously, as well. I think a number of teams do it better within the MLR structure, but we all have to be joined up.
Yep.
And the sanctioning, hopefully, and that oversight of governance gives you the ability to be able to do that.
Can I just see if the room's got a question on governance?
While you're asking that, though, I think the critical piece, and it goes back to what Evan did. What was that thing that pulled you through that, and what do we create in USA Rugby that creates that unifying? What is that message, that thing that pulls us all the way? Because when we're in the military, we take it for granted. We don't realize it until you step away from it, just like you were talking about. You don't realize that when you were there with your mates in the Marines and the Army, wherever, that you just naturally pull together because we had a common focus, common mission. When we step away from that, we lose that. And that's one of the things that drew you to rugby and how rugby's pulled you. But in this greater sense of how do we grow the game, what is that message that we use to pull all of us in the game and then the peripheries into it to unify us?
I mean, you don't want to sound like a broken record, but we've all talked about, haven't we, about the values of the game, what it can bring, life skills, and that's where our responsibility needs to go a little bit in reverse as well. I think USA Rugby there is not there to own the game in the US. We're there to help facilitate the game, and we have to, again, turn things a little bit as we should be the support mechanism for the growth of game, not the entity that's growing the game. And there are subtle differences, and I think in doing that, providing the tools, we do get to the situation with World Rugby whereby, we form part of their overall strategy as well, potentially releases funding. We've got a great relationship with the USOPC, hopefully the success of Olympics all the way through to hosting, in LA in 2028. We've got some great tools out there, but we should be the ones that help unlock those tools, but give them to everybody else.
Yep.
Instead of, you can't do that, this is us, we own the game in the US. Forget that, turn it the other way around.
Yes.
Much easier said than done, obviously.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So we've got a heckler in the crowd who's got a question. So if you go first, and then we'll come over this side of the room.
Well, speaking to a bit of the governance piece, ideally, because we are such a large land mass and there are so many people, you were saying earlier that our population of Colorado is the same as the entire country of New Zealand. So how does USA Rugby help to facilitate maybe more communication in regional areas, or are there plans in place to kind of help people be better at communicating with one another over rugby to unify?
I mean,
So can I just let me
Oh,
repeat this? Come on, Ross. You
I
know
was
the
going.
process. Protocol.
I'm going to
He's
forget
got
what I
an
was going to say now.
Get it. That's
He's
right.
got an
There's
answer.
Yep. We'll give you a pass if you don't get it right.
Take a breath. Take a breath. Have a sip. So just
point.
with landmass geography and populations in states in the US that are the same as a small European country, for example, how do we better get that message out or unifying the message? And actually, I'd like to add on to that because in my short time here,
Whoa, yeah.
rugby's the game.
You can
of
make it a
drunk-
harder
It's
question.
the game of drunks and bums. No, because it is. It's in my time in the US, it really upsets me because it's got this perception, particularly amongst families. It's a game of drunks and bums. So I think that just dovetails in here, and there's some really smart people in it, and some awesome people in it.
I'm offended.
You're smart and awesome. How
I'm
can
not,
you
I'm
be
not a
offended
drunk
by
or a
that?
I was
bum.
going to say,
Whoa.
which one was the drunk?
Well, mate. So how do we better package that or get that message out?
I think and when you talk about it just now, the Six Nations games this morning, it's twofold. If I start with your wobbler of a question first, and then go on to the
real one,
the far better question from the audience, it's making sure that we use the access to what the game's about with regard to platforms, TV. If you just think about it at the moment, and let's not go down the route of where US media rights currently sit within rugby, because that's a whole other subject matter. But just the awareness of the game, and I think I was saying to Otis earlier, I've been in the US 6 years. The only way I could see rugby 6 years ago was some hooky VPN through my brother-in-law's password, the Sky Sports site in the US that you sort of view things. Now we're talking about, which game should we put on? Should we put on the Premiership game? Should we put on ESPN Plus? Should we put on NBC? Have been a strong supporter of rugby for years with their World Cup rights. They had 800,000, I think, viewerships over their Rugby World Cup packages. So the exponential growth and the exponential value to the game is there. So, you look at things like, again, we've done a bunch of the research on it. Just rugby is being used. Toyota have done an ad. Instead of a soccer mum, there's a rugby, she's getting the kids out the back of the car to a rugby game. The Modern Family talking about, the wife played rugby. The word rugby is getting used, and I defy anyone to say anything different. That the awareness of rugby and what rugby is about. Football. I used to be involved with Sorelli and Atavis in Seattle, and we picked on that. What's the connection between football and rugby and the shoulder leverage tackle and tackle systems, and that's gone on to leaps and bounds. And the Texas High School Association have just basically mandated that any youth football coach has to be certified in shoulder leverage tackling. So that's going to transition through. The word rugby used within football from a tackling, and there's a bit punting as well, isn't there, from the Aussie rules football stroke rugby perspective. It's with a big stick, isn't it? Yeah. So I think we're getting there with regard to the awareness of removing that. Everyone gets naked and drunk and runs around the college campus. Oh, that's the rugby team. Look,
Wow.
So but
We've
we are
all been
exactly.
there. We've all been young once.
But we are breaking down that, and I think to come back to that point of, well, how do we get that communication and messaging out? We're going through, I think the most inclusive process with regard to feedback in this whole transition phase with a task force and forcing the overall governance structure to be adapted from where it currently sits because it's not working. In a consultative phrase, and that consultation needs to go on to the next phase as well. So I'll turn it back on you. Is if you're out there and you're in the community, what do you need from us? Because it has to be different. There's not going to be one template or one plan that's going to work in Colorado, that's going to work in Massachusetts, that's going to work in Alabama. Everybody that's on the ground knows the issues that they deal with. So how can we help those areas drive what they need to do within their own geographies? Because one size is not going to fit all in the US.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, got another question over here.
How does USA Rugby monetize that image, that universal image that is so popular at this point, and how do we raise the budget?
So there you are, revenue generation. How do we get better at monetizing our game of values to get more money in the bank to help us repopulate the states?
Unfortunately, there's no money in the values. I mean, the money's ultimately going to be driven by the media markets. So, any sport and any sport structure is based on eyeballs. So, I think you look at partnerships. We've currently got a great partnership with EY and UL, who have bought into the concept of rugby. It's not just about their media recognition and media dollars. It's about helping and support. So we have to be patient and go through that transition. The real money's not going to come until the eyeballs get there. And it's utilizing potential projects like the hosting of a World Cup or the success of the MLR. There are going to be those other elements, but currently, if you look at the demographic, you look at all the statistical data based on eyeballs, it's a great participation sport. It's something that people buy into, but it's not going to drive revenue until the media values rise and you get eyeballs. It used to just be the TV. There's about 6 different little
Including this
iPads
podcast.
included and podcasts. But it is a different environment. So what I'm saying is let's make sure we build a long-term strategy. Make sure that we really quantify a return of investment from our existing partnerships, over-deliver where we can collectively at all levels of the game to show the benefit of the values and the buy-in and tell the story. And there will be exponential growth in revenue, but there's no quick magic fix out there that's going to generate easy cash for us. It's going to be hard yards, and we have to all buy into the fact that it's going to take time to build that and break down the barriers to, even 2% of the American media market now would literally dwarf the figures I gave around England and France earlier. I mean, it is the biggest sports media market in the world. So the potential's there. We just have to be patient, have a plan, and build with it.
So we're close to time now, and you guys have given us so much time. Super grateful. So last, for either Evan or Ross, any questions? Simple ones before we close out. Well, we're like War and Peace right now.
Yeah, I know. We're going deep.
Would you be willing to come on for a part 2?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Evan, what's your part 2?
I don't know. Yeah, absolutely.
Bring your boat.
Remember, he's a Marine. He's a Marine.
You just tell me where to show up.
Actually, I've got
Oh,
one.
we got one question over here. Go on.
I had asked Evan earlier what his next challenge was
Yeah.
going to be, and he hadn't quite figured it out.
Right, Evan.
Trying to figure it out.
Live.
See if I can put some pressure on him.
We're putting a live trust
What's
contract
the
in
next
here. What's your
adventure?
next
one?
challenge?
Funny enough, I don't know what the next challenge is yet. I've learned so much over my life, and it's always about being in the place, like I've said earlier, to be ready to grab those opportunities. So my eyes are open for the next opportunity. Funny enough, though, as soon as I got back, my wife said, "You need to start playing rugby again. You need to come back out to the field and start playing rugby again." So it's probably about time to get back on the pitch.
That's what we wanted to
do
hear.
some
We
of
like
that,
your
so.
wife. She needs to come on the show.
So
Any more questions out there? And so last one, just from me then, Ross. And seriously, thank you so much, because me and Otis tag team on this. We know what a minefield you're walking through right now. And huge respect for you coming on and coming down to a local pub and just engaging with our community, because it can't be easy walking out your front door right now. So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for taking the time here. But last question for me.
No, the
But
Right. What's your vision, like, in terms of you got the full unicorn environment out there, no issues, no financial issues. You're just out there going, it's all unicorns, rainbows, and sprinkles. What does rugby in the USA look like in that land of the unicorn?
Listen,
10 years.
Oh no, that's the next question. When we pin him down, we pin him down on a time.
That's why we got him sitting in the corner.
You let the cat out of the bag, Otis.
I mean, I think we've touched on so many fronts. You look at rugby and where rugby sits globally. I think we're one of only probably 3 or 4 nations that I think tries to get parity as much as we can, which is very difficult around the women's game and the men's game and the 7s and 15s. And we don't, we've not got enough cash anyway. But you look at how our national teams perform and the potential they have to perform. The Olympics are coming up. Both the men's and women's teams, strong medal contenders. The women have got the World Cup in 21 in New Zealand. They're currently ranked 5 in the world, and obviously semi-finalists last time round.
It's with the women. We heard it.
The men's environment, because of the money that's in the men's game and where the golf that we sit, we're always going to currently struggle. But to me, the unicorn and rainbows is continue to grow and develop the aspirational side of the national teams. We talked about providing the tools that need to be out there for, the pyramid to exist properly, from the grassroots community through the age grade through to those national teams is just be successful on all the fronts. I think I think we've got huge opportunities, and it's just be patient. Let's all buy into where we want to get to. Let's understand the aspirational nature of unlocking the success of the national teams. We can't just concentrate on them. I think previously, potentially, we have as well, to the detriment of the community game. But have the tools in place to decentralize and push things through from the bottom up. So, if we do that, I have the utmost confidence that we will currently be, and I had this argument when I think the men were 12th in Europe in November before the World Cup. If you aggregate the world rankings of men's and women's 7s and 15s, people keep on talking about this sleeping giant. It's the thing that winds me up more than anything, I think, because the sleeping giant's no more. It's woken. It's wobbling around a bit. I think I've said in a couple of different interviews. But if we can stabilise that giant, but we're 3rd in the world if you cumulatively take the world rankings, or were at one point. Outside of England and New Zealand, and it's how can we be a sleeping giant when you cumulatively take the rankings of all 4 national teams, and we combine to be 3rd or 4th in the world.
Yeah.
We're already, you could argue, overreaching towards success, and let's just keep going. Let's make sure we look after our athletes. That's 1 F, not 2. Athletes. And let's
all
put
the athletes from South London.
Let's put the infrastructure in place, and let's make sure that we give them the platform that they need, and hopefully everything else flows up through this reorganisation to make it more successful.
And I think with that, and just to close, the message to our rugby community is let's get positive with what we've got, and create a really good value proposition, because we're on the way. It just may not feel like it.
Yeah, and there are huge growing pains, as we said. You look at the growth metrics when we've talked about awareness.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, we're on a path, but with growing pains happen. We talked about happen in the UK.
Yeah.
When I was at Harlequins, nearly 20 years ago, we struggled in that first period by disregarding the community and thinking everything was just going to work because we were now paying players and we were going to have a successful environment.
Yeah.
It's got to make sure we get all the bits of the jigsaw together.
Mate, awesome. We could go on for
Before
hours.
you close it, though,
He's always got one.
always
You
got
thought
one
I was the
more.
hangman.
Yes, right.
Right.
No, but this is so. This is for both of you. So I'll give you a break and let Evan go first. But what can we do? What can the audience do to support your next thing? What's your next priority that we can do to support you? How can we help?
So like I said, I rode the ocean with an organization called Fight or Die. That's OAR, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit that is supporting veterans and using ocean rowing and building the community to help address mental health issues and reintegration issues with veterans. So if you're interested in following us along, we have a 2020 team, we have a 2021 team. We're going to keep sending veterans across the ocean as long as veterans are struggling to reintegrate and with those mental health issues. So follow us on social media. We're out here doing this stuff. It's not
Fight
rugby,
or die,
but it's
correct?
pretty fun. Yeah, it's fight or die.
Got it. Thank
So
you.
just follow along.
Can I get on that road?
Yeah, you sure can.
Hey, I'm like Charlton Heston and Ben Hur. I have to know.
Yeah, your son got a 2-ton boat. But the,
Bring the weight scales up.
no,
New world record.
I think from my side, it's just collectively to everyone here and everyone that's going to watch it and beyond is let's all be ambassadors for the sport. Let's apply the values that we all talk about as being the thing that get us into the game and keep us in the game. Think about those all the time and just be that ambassador. Go out there, speak about it. To me, that's the single biggest thing. We have got a great community, but live by those values that you preach about. Don't do things in contradiction to those values. And I think the more ambassadors we can have for the sport, then the better for everybody.
Yep.
Amen.
Thanks.
Ross, thank you. Giving up Sunday time
Ross.
from your family. Thank you very much. Right, and thank you. Mick Mullins Irish Pub still claims to be the best Guinness on Broadway in Denver. But I want to get the Guinness
It
test.
is the best Guinness
It
in
might
Denver.
be as Guinness.
But I want to do the Guinness test. So we're going to close out because we have to do the 119 seconds to pour a perfect pint of Guinness. You up for that, Mick? Right, switch the cameras off. No, you got to pour one in 119 seconds. Okay, thank you, fellas. Thank you very much. And thank you to our community. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.